I'm Jay Beershank. I'm a young man on an adventure. My adventure led me to cross paths with Octavio here. I saw him and I was like, oh, that guy probably is probably holding space. And then sure enough, we're here holding space together. And we're gonna hold space with you.
Nice. Yeah, no, I feel that. Yeah, 100% like just holding space in nature right now. We felt like that Jay has been having a lot of good ideas, especially on his journey, and we're kind of in this age of information access that's really given us as humans so much more free range to sort of explore our consciousness and be able to look a little deeper into how reality's working, not just around here, but just internally, what's going on with our own minds and how that relates to other people and to other consciousness, and how we're kind of finding that there's just different levels of consciousness, and we want to probably express that it's something we'll be talking about here right now, but we don't want to say that we're assuming that we're excluded from this. It's things that we're still dealing with too, and the main reason is because a lot of this stuff goes so deep, just in terms of how everyone's relating to the world and what that has to do with what we're seeing today in terms of what's going on in the news, or just what's going on socially, or what's going on just in our own households.
Yeah, and if anything, I'd like to touch on that too, with the idea of like not trying to portray like we have the truth or anything, or be exclusive. I think that's a really huge difference between like if you want to use the term open-mindedness and closed-mindedness. If you have a more open mind, you're more inclusive with everything, with your life, with yourself. You're able to experience all the different emotions and all the different archetypes because you're inclusive. You don't feel exclusive. When I think of exclusive, I think of the ego as well. You have an identity and you're exclusively within it, and you don't allow others to penetrate it. But when you're being more inclusive, like how we're doing now, holding the space and just trying to talk, we're trying to include, not because we think we're right, but because the more minds we have coming together, the more information out there that we can express and believe in and truly care about, I think the better.
Without a doubt. Yeah, that's something that's real, I feel like, in school and like teaching. I think that the whole idea of creating buy-in, that's something I came across a long time ago, is like if you have a teacher in a classroom when you're in the 8th grade and they're talking about math, if they can't get you to buy into learning about it, there's no opening. There's a certain opening that actually that's in people, that a good example of someone who's been through a lot of pain because of something that they're doing inside themselves that they don't want to look at, but maybe you've been through so much pain because of that. Eventually you get to the point where there'll be an opening to where maybe you'll take a more closer look at who you are. That's why it's really tough to give your friend, maybe you'll have an epiphany reading a book or something like that, or you come across some information, you tell your friends like, yo, check this out, and they're like, they still don't really like look at it because there's no opening. There's literally just not an opening to learn, and so that's why so many things that even we'll say today could go way past someone else, or maybe they could really resonate just because of that opening that's there. But it's something to keep in mind, especially if we're kind of going through certain levels of knowledge that are kind of outside of the range of what most people are thinking. But at this point, I live there. Like, I want to live there, but not in terms of like alienating myself or anything, but really starting to get a more, not even objective, but just zooming back, peeling off of the...
If we could retract a little bit, when you say you live there, are you saying you live in that space of being open to receive information?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Just continually being open and more willing to learn more and know more. But as you do that, your whole perception and view on things starts to get more holistic, and you can really start to see things as really connected everywhere. And it's so much that it's a real lens that you can actually put on yourself when you're actually interacting in the world. And it's sort of like a roadmap. As you're moving around, you can sort of put things together in terms of why that person's acting like that, why those people ended up in that situation, why other people, their whole lives play out the way that they do, and what trends and patterns are actually emerging and where they're from. But to actually have that blueprint or have that lens that you're using and moving through life, it's now you're in a way different position that I feel like you can have fun with for a while, but then eventually you'll get to the point where I feel there's a responsibility. There's like a real responsibility to actually be able to like share that, and that's why we're even making this at this point. And so I thought we'd just jump off and dive in right now, talking about unconsciousness and unconscious thought patterns and where they come from, and I will ask you where you think they come from.
Yeah, so going back a little bit too, I think that a really good way to explain what we're kind of talking about is the idea of the child's mind, right? with the child's mind, you're conscious and you're there, you're curious, you know, you're willing to learn and you're open to learn and you want to learn, right? And then as we get older, I think we can fall into more unconscious thought patterns, as you're saying, because of the facade of intelligence. I think the more intelligent or the more wise you are, the less you know. Not in a bad way or not in a, you know, in a silly way, but you realize that the teachers are everywhere. The teachers just aren't in the books, and you know, they're just not in the other people. They're everywhere. So being able to maintain a child's mind, when I say child's mind, I mean curious, open, attentive, fun, and real. You know, if you talk to a child, you know that they'll be like, what the heck you talking about?
No filter.
There's no filter, because
no filter.
Child's mind, they're curious, they're not unconscious, they're conscious and they're there. Where do I think unconscious thought patterns come from? I think that they come from the furthering of an egoic identity. And what I mean by an egoic identity is you can live your life in many ways, but I think that one way many people live their life is they start out and they say, so my name's Jay. Jay started out as a baby, and Jay got smarter and more developed, and as he got older, he got more intelligent and wiser. Now within that, there could be a closing because I'm closer to my identity and I start to just routinely act as Jay without really being present, because before I was Jay, I was, you know, I was a universal intelligence. That's my perspective, at least. I believe that
look, you see it in your eyeballs as a baby. Like, you look at your baby pictures, and you look in your eyes as a, like, as a baby,
enough,
and what's
dude.
there, like, it's all there.
That's
really
pure life. That's pure curiosity, pure love.
It's just openness,
Yeah.
like straight openness, and I feel like that's why you can't even remember. It's hard to even remember what happened, just because of how closed off we could just be moment to moment. And looking back, it's like you never really taking in really what was there, thinking I know what's going on. Right when I think I know what's happening, that's right when I cut myself off from further actually knowing. That's like where judgment comes in. It's like, if I judge that's a stick, if I judge this as a rock. But what was it before a human called it a rock, you know? But then we can talk about like the subatomic matter of it, and actually what it is as an object, like metaphysically. It's when we use rock as a word, it's kind of just like putting a label on something, and we put labels literally on trees, cars, people, and before you know it, we're in an entire world.
And ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, if we judge ourselves, then we're cutting ourselves off from more, but at the same time, you can use judgment to discern other things. So,
definitely.
but what were you saying?
Well, I think that's a good point. You can use it to discern, and discern is a great word, because discern is judgment without, I think discernment is judgment without letting the judgment affect how you treat things. So you can understand and you can discern and you can analyze, which is very important for the world, because obviously the more intelligent you get, the more you analyze things. But if you analyze things and then put labels on them and then have the labels affect how you treat them, well, then that's not always positive, because then you're running around and you're basically like a robot. This is right and this is wrong, you know?
It's just getting polarized in the logical mind. Like,
polarized is a great way to say it.
That's just the state of the world, is actually, and you see it in the Bible. Like, I guess take it from one of the early things.
Take it from the Bible.
It's like, see in the Bible how there's this sort of thing with men being up here, the masculine, the male god, and then women being subservient in some way. But how there's this left brain, right brain thing, this masculine, feminine thing, and left brain is really logical, it's really analytic, and those are really critical skills, but at the same time, right brain's creative. It could be really irrational, a lot of emotions, but if you put the masculine over the feminine, if you put logic over intuition, and then you let the logic run your life, it can literally drive the world into insanity, which is what we can
see now.
Yeah,
huh?
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, that's literally like what you can see when it's so much people caught up with linear thought and people thinking that like things need to be a certain way and not really seeing the other side where it's intuitive. And I feel like we were having the conversation in terms of just like people needing someone to tell them. Like, this is what came into my mind, is like, we lost our intuition so much as children. Children are encouraged to listen to what other people are saying and not really taught to keep mindful of like that inner voice, that actual intuition that's telling them that's really who they are, and that's a real authentic sound that's actually coming, and is always a whisper. But when there's so many noises, so many other people around us telling us and influencing us to think certain ways, that voice can get lost. And then more thinking logically, and then being fed into the system, people literally shoveling their kids into institutions, letting then the institutions deal with their kids instead of actually like raising your kids.
It goes back to the old saying too, listen to your heart, not your mind.
Wow.
Right? I think that the heart is intuition, and the intelligence or the ego can be your mind. I'm not against the mind. I'm no Eckhart Tolle, I'm not saying that the mind is evil, but I think that the mind is the blessing and the curse,
Without a doubt. Especially if you don't know where the mind doesn't know where it came from. Yeah. Like, it's really like this thing we came into being, but
I don't mean to trash talk Eckhart Tolle.
Oh, no, love Tolle.
Yeah, he's great, but...
I was like, I gave a shout out to him. I fucking love that guy, and because it's really a lot about, what was it?
His books left me very lost for a while, though, because I felt like it demonized the mind, but it didn't tell you what to do with it. It was like, don't listen to your mind, and then I went like 6 months. I was like, why am I thinking? Stop thinking. Oh, you're so low density because you think thoughts, but that's like, you're gonna think thoughts.
Yeah, that's a really quick thing that actually happens with so many books. Is like people start to use it and take it and like use it as something to judge themselves by. Like, this is what I'm doing, and I found this is what I said in one of my videos a while ago, was just how we should let your intuition guide you, and then let your logic or your rationality serve you instead, because most people they're serving their rationality in terms of just like what makes sense just for most people to actually keep doing. But when that's actually just going to work, trading your time for money, going to school, like being a people pleaser, becoming accepted, and like that just makes a lot of sense according to the structure that's already in place. But at the same time, we have this intuition that's like, oh my gosh, you're way more than this. But isn't so kind of switching that and leading with your intuition, but still having your rationality, still working with that, because that's what's going to help you really work through different levels of information. I found that even logic alone is something that's kind of a powerful weapon, like to actually like get through to people.
And that's the masculine, though.
Without a doubt, like it's a penetrating force. It's really linear. It's just like, and symbolically, it's just like a ray of light. You have like the water as the holder of the womb, and the womb's like this water sack for real, like we're in it. And then you have the light that comes in, the spirit, and then it kind of, there's actually this magic that happens to actually create a being. And when consciousness comes into play, now we're actually learning about ourselves. But if we think we're separate from everything, that's the ego. Like that's what I'm discovering, is like we're wholly a part of this. Like this thing that we're in, it's like we're a part of it, and everything that we do is actually a part of it. And for that reason, you can't fuck up. Like there's actually no doing something that wasn't supposed to happen, because you're wholly a part of this. And so the part of you that thinks that that it's possible to mess up, or that you're separate, that's your ego. And I think that that's something that can be born.
That's the judge,
without a doubt.
Yeah. And he was talking about the ray of light and the father and the masculine. I think that the more you learn and the more intelligent and wise you become, the more you can interpret a metaphor. And I think that the metaphor of Mother Earth and Holy Father is very powerful, because those are two very different energies, but they're both so fundamental, because they come in. Okay, so we have the Mother Earth sending energy up through your feet, grounding you. Then you have the Holy Father sending you all this divine wisdom. And then you have you, the son or the woman, in the middle. And then it comes in, and then it creates you. And if you're blocked off from either one of those, you're only half. You're only half. And like, that's how people can become so polarized too. Because if you're only the Holy Father, you're just completely logic and you're linear. And have you heard of the book The Chalice and the Blade?
Whoa, I've heard of it. But...
It's an amazing book, and that book talks about the masculine idealizes the power to dominate being the power that will perpetuate society and bring prosperity. The power to dominate, which is like the power of the blade, so the power to kill. And then the feminine is the power to give life, and that's the womb. That's the chalice, and the power to give life. And I think that that's where both of those things come into fruition.
So here I feel like, it can get really cryptic. I feel like going through so many levels of knowledge, like when you're getting into more like refined thought, especially stuff that was like really solid works from people like a few hundred years ago, like if you've been like raised on Cartoon Network, and like, you know what I mean, and like
Yeah.
going and what the schools have been doing, you're not even gonna be prepared to start to like be able to go into those types of like levels of information and be able to discern like what's what and not get sucked up in it, but be able to take and extract bits of information that
because
are applicable.
of the metaphors, right?
Yeah, like
it's so metaphorically dense.
It's the ability to interpret images.
Mm.
Like if you can interpret images and be able to look at symbolism, you're gonna start to see it everywhere, and that's how you're gonna be able to decode your soul and like your purpose and your meaning. Because like you can really start to find that. This dog's like
Luna.
just, yeah,
shit.
This is Luna here. She's been
She's
whipping
a
a
good
stick
pup,
around,
man.
but just a good puppy. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's really hard to actually like be relatable to people. That's why I even like bring it up is how do we calibrate? How do we take something as
Calibrate.
like,
I like that
something
word.
like, oh, it's the divine masculine and feminine, the
mhm.
Holy Trinity, all this stuff. Immediately that language is so charged. Most people
so
are just gonna be
charged.
like, nah, dude, you're already talking about something, because it's based on a memory that they had with religion or those other
Exactly.
things that just cut them off from actually further inquiry into what's actually going on.
That's
And so,
huge, man.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's where the metaphors come in too, right? Because it's like, just because someone says something, your defined label of what that word means does not mean that's what that word is, and not what it means. It's a metaphor. And I don't mean to be like advocating for postmodernism where you can interpret anything any way you want, but it's like when people say the Holy Trinity is so close to my heart, but I'm not a Christian. Like I have no affiliation with Christianity, but the Holy Trinity is extremely close to my heart because mind, body, and spirit, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, those to me mean a lot. They mean a lot because I have a body, I have a mind, and I have a soul. And those are the most important things to me.
So let's connect it. Like, so the Holy Trinity is close to your heart. How about, just for a thought experiment, video games are close to my heart, right? So I don't even give a fuck about Holy Trinity, but I got video games. But then you can really start to see how life is a lot like that. A life is a lot like a game. You have a character, you're operating, you're controlling the character, and there's someone actually sitting on the couch holding the character. That's your soul. It's like your spirit who's holding it. You know what I mean? And
like
you
that.
can apply that as a metaphor to your immediate being and your immediate like existence, to where now you're in a totally different world, and how you're relating with reality. It can be a lot like a video game, and that could be far off from the truth, but if it works for you, that is all that matters. And don't let anyone tell you that like you can't like work with things, especially like spiritually. I call this spiritual pragmatism, and it's just taking whatever works, whatever's helpful. Like if you want to believe in archangels or reincarnations, like go ahead and do it if it helps you. Like and, like continue to do that, because this is like open source spirituality.
Dude, yeah. This touches on one of my most passionate things, spiritual pragmatism. I like that a lot. And what that can lead to, spiritual pragmatism, I think what it has led to in the past is people believing that's what's pragmatic for them is pragmatic for all. And then what that can lead to, what I think is a venomous ideology. That's strong wording, I know. But it's like, if he thinks that video games are the way to understand spirituality and the way to be grounded in reality, and then he doesn't appreciate that I think about the Trinity, and then he believes me to be wrong, well then we can look back in history and we can see so many genocides and wars because they're fighting over God. They're
dogma.
They're fighting over dogma, and I think that that's so important too, because that is so minuscule too. Like you can think like, oh, it's not good to drink pasteurized milk, and since you drink pasteurized milk, like you obviously haven't awoken to the the badness of drinking pasteurized milk. And like when you're thinking that, it can be so unconscious, and that goes back to unconscious thought patterns, right?
Yeah, I without a doubt, that's what I see is like right when, because you can do it. It's like we're all unique. We're all so unique here, and so you can go on this path in yourself and find a different way, and you can come back and tell everyone about it. That's great. But the second you tell people that's the way it's supposed to be for everyone, that's where where a lot of atrocities can be birthed. In terms of just like, this is the way it is. But really, how foolish is that, when really we're all so different. We're so unique and so complex individually. And that's why, again, tying it back to earlier, that's why it's so detrimental to our souls and our spirit, just by depending on other people to tell us what's going on with how we should feel about ourselves. And but that's really how it's designed. As a baby, we need connection, we need love, and when people withdraw that love as children, we feel it literally feels like we could die, especially if you depend on those people for survival. survival. So you're gonna do whatever you can to actually like measure up and continue to like get approved of by your family or whatever. But then as you're forming an identity, you're literally forming a personality over that entire course of time. But if you don't actually look back on that and see how we were really on our heels the whole time as we put together this persona that isn't really truly who we are, then you can live with that and die with that until you become aware of it. So that's why we're even bringing up this topic of unconscious thought patterns, because it's shit like that you can keep living with every day and not even know you're in it. Like it's so many things, like you could even have a word written on your hand, but if it's right in your face, you can't read it until you pull it back a bit. And then you can start to assess things from a place that's way more objective. And so that's where, not objective, but more informed, more aware of the bigger scope.
And from a very applicable standpoint too, do you ever in your life have situations where you don't get along with people? Do you ever have situations where people don't like you or they don't get along with you? I think that almost 99% of the time stems from having unconscious thought patterns that you're living through, that you're letting live through you without understanding. And it's like, I don't like this person because of what they do, but you don't understand why you don't like what they do, because what you don't like about them is so close to your identity that you just are doing it unconsciously.
Yeah.
Do you believe me there?
That's huge. Like because this is a mirror. Like this whole reality is a mirror, and your brain has a selective focus. Even you watching this video right now, your brain can like focus on specific things, anything someone says, just because of where you're at internally, your state. Your brain's gonna actually put out information that is actually gonna reinforce where you're at already.
Big time.
Like it's really like that. So anytime if I said like, oh, like that person says something like, oh fuck you, that's actually because that person reminds me of a part of myself that I don't like, but it's an unconscious part of myself, so it gets projected. That's the projection of actually how you can really start to see how anything anyone says to you, good or bad, like you don't have to take it personal at all, because that's not your stuff. They don't know you. No one knows you except for you, not even your fucking parents. Like because they know you so close. You can know one really, really close, but at the same time, just because they're not you, there's no other perception that's like yours looking out from your eyes. And so when you can start to be able to clear space for yourself and actually, and this I call this astral real estate, because then you actually have a space in yourself that is literally yours, and then you can actually operate from that space, and there's more freedom to actually be yourself and do what you want, and not be able to give in to all the influences that are going on and be so reactive to the world. It's
such an interesting paradox, but I feel like the less tight you hold on to your identity, the more free you are, and the more comfortable you feel in situations, because you don't have to live up to your own expectations of who you think you are. You just basically, I think once you can let go of the identity, you try to identify the highest ideals that are meta right. And when I say right, that might be the best word, but meta holy, like acceptance and inclusion, and then you can live from those instead of trying to live from the expectations of the 20-year-old Jay that you see before you, because I have a lot of expectations of myself, and it's hard to live through those, but it's a lot easier and a lot more fun, and I can add a lot more value to the world by just living through the highest ideals that I know of, which are acceptance and humor and love and fun.
Like, what else are you gonna do?
Yeah,
like
exactly. Are you gonna live like, it's like living with the mirror being a literal mirror where you just stare into the mirror and you always never feel good enough, or you can see the mirror in other people, and like when I talk to Octavio, I see him smile and I'm like, okay, I'm probably doing the right thing.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and there's a reason too. Like there's such a reason for all the stuff, all the interactions you're having and what you're picking out from that. It has so much to do with where you're at and what you're actually learning right now. Just because like being on Earth, we're learning something. Like this whole thing is a school, and there's teachers everywhere, whether it be moss and you learn from the moss and how it grows,
how comfy it is,
other plants and other things. Like there's so many metaphors that line up everywhere. Like an example would be like thought, or words and thoughts being like seeds. Like if I usually use words and then it goes in someone's mind, and their soil, if their mind is soil and my words are seeds, I could plant words in the soil of their mind, and depending on the contents of that soil, it could grow or it could not grow. So like a negative thought, like you're stupid, if I have actually cultivated my mind and my soil to actually be resonating at a higher frequency beyond like judgment and shame, then that seed won't grow. But if we've been feeding our minds a bunch of like negativity and stuff like that, and then it's going to be so much easier for someone to come with a negative idea, and then that in your soil, and then that'll grow as a weed in your mind, and now you got to live with that. Like there's so much of this that's actually happening on a quantum level. Like it's so fast, and it's so like just you were developing a personality. Like it was happening before you could know what was actually going on. And I'm saying there's so many things in the reality that are actually going on that we still aren't aware of, and it can be responsible for the things that we just don't know why. Like, why do I feel this way? Why is this conflict? Why are there these other people that are actually like saying this one thing, and then these people are saying the other, and they want to like fight or have a war? It's like so many things, but then it'll start to make a lot of sense when you can start to put together this whole thing as a connected idea.
I think it's really important to say too, going back to the beginning about being inclusive, like I don't know about you, but like everything we're talking about, to me it's a minute to minute practice. It's not like I have it figured out. Like it's not like I can just wake up in the morning and, you know, be totally centered and holistic. I have to go through my practice, right? It's not something that is just, it's not something that's one and done. It's not a goal and I achieved the goal and now I just am enlightened or something, you know? It's like something that I have to work every day and every minute. And that's why I really like the idea you were talking about, the mirroring of personalities with other people, and like when someone says something to you that you take offense to or you don't like. I really like the practice of thank you, I love you. Have you ever heard of that?
I have. Like look in the mirror and saying that?
Well,
or say it every day in the morning?
That too, but I say it every time I have a thought or an interaction with someone that I think is egotistical, maybe it might be the right word to say it, or mind-based. Like when I see someone and I'll be honest, I judge people sometimes in my mind. I mean, like I can't help it. They come to me like, oh, that person looks like they might be on drugs. And you know what? That might be true, but then in my mind I say thank you, I love you. And when I say thank you, I love you, the thank you is the appreciation for them to show me something, for me to be able to grow within myself. Like, okay, I identified this in them and I noticed it, and now thank you for the opportunity for me to see that and grow from it and be able to move past it. And then the I love you is the complete grateful release of that experience and that learning and that moment, so then I can be present the next moment. And literally I try to practice that second to second. Obviously I can't go through my mind saying thank you, I love you every second, but I try to say it as much as I can, because it's important to stay present, it's important to stay grateful, and I think that it's really important. Well, I don't know.
Well, it's like you can set those things up as habits.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's hard to get going at first with these things, but once you get the wheel going on like actually setting that up in your brain, like you can program your brain to where every time you have a certain type of interaction that makes you
programmed.
You literally program yourself. Yeah. We've been programmed just by society and movies and like playing characters unconsciously, but now we can actually look at how we've been programmed, why we've been programmed, and now we can start to see why we would want to deprogram that and reprogram ourselves with new ideas, new thoughts, and we actually have the power to do that because it can go as far as it's already gone in terms of like really how we feel about ourselves. Like, yeah.
And that goes back to your idea of spiritual pragmatism too. Like the thank you, I love you, that works amazingly for me right now in this point in my life. But like there are infinite amount of other ways that you could do that exact same practice that might work for you, right?
Well, anything. You could do anything. You can literally use anything.
Just being aware of it too.
Well, it's the awareness, and then at the same time, it's your imagination. And you need to have a
imagination is super important.
It's the key. It's literally the key, because if you can't imagine a life for you where it's actually worth it. Oh, nice.
Woo!
Nice. Come on, puppy. Okay, cool. I can just edit that too.
If you can't imagine a life for you.
Or you can like that sidebar.
Yeah.
Could
like twist it up?
Twist it down. There you go.
Okay.
More level. Nice. So if you can't imagine a reality for yourself where you actually like it's worth it to start breathing more, or it's worth it to actually start going for your dreams, like, and that reality is where your dreams come true. And if you could see it clearly, it would be a no-brainer to make certain decisions throughout the day to actually remain conscious or stay with things, like, because it's that vision. but to actually have your imagination, you can start to do things in your mind that are out of this world. I've had teachers, like really good teachers before, go through like even guided meditations where you just go in your mind and you take a feeling, and what color is that feeling? You can hold in your hand and you could throw it up and make it and turn it into rain, and then like, but then this is all happening in your consciousness, and it literally is a processing. It's a way that you can process so many things, but it's literally just with your mind and your consciousness. And so being able to use that and feed your imagination. Is the battery low?
I'm just getting there.
Okay, cool.